Have you ever wondered if you can truly recognize the dangerous people around you? Most of us believe we can spot them. We think danger comes dressed in obvious signs: aggression, cruelty, hostility. We assume we can tell when someone is toxic, when their energy is heavy, when their words cross the line. But what if the greatest threats don't look like villains at all? What if the most destructive people often appear charming, kind, even trustworthy? While you defend yourself against visible enemies, you may be leaving your mind open to something far more dangerous. Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, spent his life uncovering these hidden psychological dynamics. In his book, The Ego and the Unconscious, Jung revealed that most of what shapes our behavior lies outside conscious control. It is not the surface personality that rules us, but the vast world of the unconscious. And this does not apply only to you. It applies to everyone you know. That is where the real danger begins. Because when someone refuses to confront their own darkness, their unconscious seeks a host. Very often, that host is another person. Sometimes, it is you. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you felt drained after speaking with someone? How many times have you been blamed for emotions you never caused? Or treated like the savior of a tragedy that never belonged to you? This is projection. Jung described it as an unconscious process where an individual throws onto another what they cannot admit in themselves. The moment this happens, you stop being seen as who you are. You become a symbol, a mirror, an imagined enemy, an idealized rescuer. And the most disturbing part is that none of those images is actually you. Yet, you may not even notice you've entered this game. You believe you are helping. You think you're being empathetic. You convince yourself you're mature. Meanwhile, you are being pulled into conflicts that were never yours. Jung warned us, the greatest dangers do not always come from deliberate malice. They come from unconscious forces. They come from people alienated from their own psyche, dominated by masks, complexes, repressed desires. They are not evil by intent, but they are dangerous. And this danger is subtle. It does not storm through the door. It seeps in slowly, through quiet accusations, through loaded silences, through small but piercing remarks, until one day you doubt yourself, until you lose contact with your own inner reality. At that point, you become part of their shadow. Maybe this is something you've already experienced in a friendship, at work, even in your family. Maybe you've wondered, what is wrong with me? The answer is nothing. The problem is not who you are. The problem is that you are being used as a vessel for someone else's unconscious world. In this video, we will walk through 6 personality types that Jung would consider emotionally dangerous. They do not act with planned cruelty. They are not obvious villains. They are driven by hidden forces they cannot see in themselves. And that is why they cause so much destruction. We will explore Jung's words, his concepts, his warnings. We will look at examples from his works: Ion, the ego and the unconscious, archetypes and the collective unconscious. We will see how to recognize these types, and also how to question whether these patterns might exist inside ourselves. Are you ready? Take a deep breath and continue. But be warned, after hearing this, you will not look at people, or even at yourself, in the same way. Imagine living with someone who blames you for every feeling they have. When they are angry, it must be your fault. When they are sad, you must have disappointed them. When they feel small, it must be because you act superior. At first, they appear sensitive, fragile, even deep. But slowly you realize you are being drawn into a battlefield that does not belong to you. This is the unconscious manipulator. The unconscious manipulator does not face their own wounds. They project them outward, using others as a canvas for their inner conflicts. Jung explained that projection is a normal psychological function. But when unrecognized, it becomes destructive. He called it a form of psychic blindness, the inability to see another person as they are. Instead, you see them as a symbol of what you refuse to face in yourself. This is exactly what the unconscious manipulator does. They no longer see you. They see their pain, their shame, their unhealed trauma reflected back. They cast you into roles: enemy, betrayer, savior, villain. None of those roles belong to you, yet you end up living them. And here's the trap. These people often appear charismatic. They seem sensitive, artistic, soulful. You think you can help them, that you understand them better than anyone else. You sacrifice your own balance, trying to heal wounds that are not yours. But the more you give, the deeper you sink. Jung warned, when you are caught in projection, you are not in a real relationship. You are in a symbolic one. You become part of someone else's illusion. The only way to escape is through awareness. You must learn to ask, is this feeling truly mine? Or was it planted in me? Because the unconscious manipulator does not break into your life. They slip in through the cracks of your empathy. Once you begin to recognize this, you may notice another mask. The bearer of the persona. This type of person does not overwhelm you with projection. Instead, they pull you into a world where everything is performance. The persona, as Jung defined it, is the social mask we all wear. It is the role that helps us function in society. Teacher, parent, friend, leader. On its own, the persona is not dangerous. The danger begins when someone identifies too closely with it, when they believe they are only the mask. The bearer of the persona seems perfect, always polite, always appropriate, always composed. They say what is expected. They act as they should. But behind the facade, the real self suffocates. And those who live with such a person can feel it. Conversations lack depth. Gestures feel rehearsed. Spontaneity disappears. Worse, the bearer of the persona expects you to join the play. They project their need for control onto you. You find yourself measured, corrected, silenced whenever you step outside the script. Over time, you too start wearing a mask, without even noticing. Jung warned that this over-identification with the persona blocks individuation, the process of becoming whole. When a person lives only for their role, they lose connection to their true self, and the cost is heavy. But repression never disappears. Everything hidden, denied, or pushed aside gathers strength in the unconscious, until it returns with force. That is where we meet the next type, the owner of the repressed shadow. The shadow, as Jung described, contains everything we reject in ourselves. The envy we disguise, the anger we deny, the impulses we condemn, the ambitions we cover with false humility. None of these vanish when ignored. They retreat into the unconscious, waiting. The owner of the repressed shadow looks admirable on the surface, disciplined, polite, helpful. But underneath is a storm. They cannot tolerate weakness in others because it mirrors the weakness they deny in themselves. They condemn mistakes because mistakes terrify them. They become controlling, critical, moralistic. And then, one day the shadow erupts. It may come as a sudden rage, a silent but cruel withdrawal, a passive-aggressive sabotage. For those around them, it feels like walking on a minefield. You never know when the explosion will come. Jung explained, "The stronger the persona, the darker the shadow. And the more it is repressed, the more violent its eventual release." This is why living near someone with a heavy shadow feels unstable. Small events trigger massive reactions. Old grudges never fade. Resentment poisons the air. The relationship becomes unpredictable, filled with suppressed hostility. But here lies a paradox. The shadow is not only negative, it also contains hidden potential, creativity, power, vitality. Yet when ignored, all of it turns toxic. Often, shadow repression is supported by a sense of superiority, by rigid moral ideals. And this leads us directly to the fourth type, the moral controller. Not every oppressor carries a weapon. Some use rules, dogmas, and so-called virtue. The moral controller believes they embody ethics, purity, or righteousness. But beneath the surface, they are repressing their own contradictions. Instead of integrating their shadow, they project it onto others. They condemn what they secretly desire. They accuse others of what they refuse to admit in themselves. According to Jung, the heavier the repression, the stronger the need to project. This is why the moral controller points fingers. They place themselves as the standard, not because they are whole, but because they cannot face their own flaws. And they truly believe they are saving others, correcting them, guiding them. This conviction makes them especially toxic. Their words often come disguised as concern. "I only want the best for you. One day you'll thank me." Someone has to tell you the truth. But their truth is not neutral. It is projection. In Ion, Jung reflected on the archetypes of Christ and Antichrist as symbols of unity and division. The moral controller imagines themselves as light, but they deny their own darkness completely. When you live near a moral controller, you may start to feel guilty simply for being yourself. You feel judged for your natural impulses. You feel ashamed for ordinary mistakes. Slowly, you censor yourself, repress parts of your identity, and live in fear of their disapproval. Their morality becomes your prison. Jung saw this dynamic often in families, religions, and strict institutions. Where there is too much moralism, there is usually little self-knowledge. Excessive righteousness masks deep, unconscious conflict. But the moral controller is not the only one ruled by hidden forces. Another type is even more unstable, unpredictable, and explosive. The complex-ridden person. The complex-ridden individual is controlled by unconscious fragments of memory and emotion. Jung called these fragments complexes. They are like small personalities inside us, created by trauma, rejection, humiliation, or loss. A complex can take control of consciousness in an instant. A harmless comment may awaken a memory of abandonment. A joke may echo old humiliation. Suddenly, the person reacts with intensity that makes no sense in the present. Living with such a person is like walking on unstable ground. One moment they are affectionate, loving, even generous. The next, they are furious, distant, or accusing. A compliment can turn into a demand. A smile can shift into suspicion. This inconsistency creates confusion. You think they're not always like this. Sometimes they're wonderful. And those glimpses of connection keep you invested. You cling to the good moments, hoping they will last. But Jung made it clear, complexes do not disappear when ignored. They live in the unconscious, feeding on unprocessed pain. When activated, they take over the personality. The person believes they are acting rationally, but they are reliving old wounds. For those around them, the experience is exhausting. You adapt, shrink, and censor yourself to avoid triggering the storm. You tiptoe, hoping to maintain peace. But the truth is, the chaos is not caused by you. The storm is already inside them, waiting for a spark. This endless cycle drains your stability. The ghosts of their past begin to haunt your present. And without noticing, you too become trapped in their unconscious drama. But there is one more type Jung warned of. A type that does not explode, accuse, or moralize. Instead, they silently consume your energy until nothing remains. The psychic vampire. The psychic vampire does not attack directly. They drain you with constant neediness, endless complaints, or subtle manipulation. They do not want your company. They want your energy. At first, it looks like affection. They seek your support, your attention, your comfort. You give because you care. But slowly, giving becomes constant. You provide time, presence, emotional labor. Yet no matter how much you offer, it is never enough. Jung described this as a symbiotic relationship, a bond where two people fail to see themselves as separate individuals. Instead, one clings to the other as a source of psychic survival. The psychic vampire lives in such a bond. They fear independence. They refuse to grow. They attach to you as if you are their lifeline. And soon, you cannot tell where they end and you begin. The exhaustion is deep, not just physical, but existential. Your sense of self erodes. You feel guilty for wanting space, selfish for needing rest, cold for asking for distance. Meanwhile, they reverse the roles. They appear as the victim, but in truth, they are the manipulator. Jung insisted that freedom comes only by making the unconscious conscious. This truth applies both ways. You must recognize when others project onto you, but also when you fall into these patterns yourself. Because none of us is immune. At some point in life, you may have been a manipulator, a persona bearer, a shadow owner, or even a psychic vampire. We all carry darkness. We all carry pain. The difference is whether we choose to confront it or project it outward. If you've made it this far, it means you are ready to look, to see, to name what has been hidden. This awareness is the first step toward freedom. Remember, this is not about blaming others. It is about refusing to stay hostage to unconscious dynamics. It is about reclaiming your inner sovereignty. So now I ask you, which of these 6 types have you encountered in your life? And more importantly, which of them do you recognize in yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help others see their own patterns. And if this video resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and like. It helps us grow, and it ensures you won't miss the next part of this journey. Because the more light we shed on the unconscious, the less it controls us.